explain what it feels like to sit in a room with all those kids and watch them worship that way after seeing where they lived the day before and going, you got to be kidding me. The joy in their eyes, and I tell you, it totally made sense because I thought, what if that was a girl that I sponsored? What if that was a kid I sponsored? And I got to see just for 6 hours a day where they got to go at the school where there's so much life, so much joy. Man, the amount of blessing, it just finally hit me, and I realized that would bring me so much more joy than spending it on myself or receiving that money. It finally all made sense. It is more blessed to give than to receive, because what if you were responsible for that school? I just sat there thinking, what if this were my school? What if I paid for it? What would I feel right now? Can any amount of money that I would receive to spend on myself ever cause me that much joy? There's no way. I started asking him, I go, man, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, you know what, at least let me sponsor a kid at least, just bring me a kid. I asked the lady, I said, just bring me a kid, and she said, she goes, how many? I thought I said a kid, but when she asked how many, then you feel guilty saying one, so I said, two, and I go, if you get two little girls, and so she comes with these two girls, and says, yeah, their mom mom and dad just recently died of AIDS, and we're taking them in, and, most of them, their parents are dying of AIDS, there, and so I said, yeah, I'll definitely, $50 a month, big deal, and who's that little girl behind them? They said, oh, that's their sister. Like I'm going to leave their sister on the street, Okay, sister, come on, I want to keep the whole family together. She goes, it's not the whole family. How'd I know that was coming? There's their brother, hey, bring their brother, $100 a month, and just bringing this family together and thinking, man, this is so cool to have this little family on the other side of the world that I can send to school, that I can give them an education, which is a rare thing. They get to go to school, they get fed, they get clothes, they get vitamins and all of that. I thought, man, what's going to bring me more joy than knowing that I've got, this family out there? Someone giving me $100 a month? I'm not saying that, I wouldn't like that or whatever. We'd all enjoy that. Someone gives you $100 a month. But I tell you, that doesn't compare, not even close to the amount of blessing of giving $100 a month and saying, man, to be able to see these kids later on. And so I'm talking to the pastor, and I'm going, gosh, what can we do, though? As a church, I want to do more. I'm going to go back and tell these people, and I've got a congregation at home and so many things I want to do personally. And he says, well, our biggest need is a high school right now. See, all these kids, they go up to junior high school, and that's it, because we don't have a high school for them. And he goes, and that's great because they have a relationship with God, they're growing up, they have knowledge, they know the Word. He goes, but still, we'd love them to have a high school education so they could really get going in their careers and have more positions of influence, to influence more of the nation this way. And I was like, well, what are you waiting for? And he says, well, we need the money to build the building. I said, how much would it cost to build a high school out there? And he says, well, we need 4 classrooms. Each one would house like 40 to 50 students. Okay? How much would those 4 classrooms cost? He goes, the total for the school would cost somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000. It's like, are you kidding me? $15,000 to $20,000 and you can build a high school? That you're telling me, hundreds of kids would go to this high school and graduate every year, worshiping God, serving Him with their lives for $15,000 to $20,000, and you haven't had the money to build the building? He goes, no, that's our biggest need right now. And it hit me right there. I thought, what would bring me more joy in life? That's a piece of cake. I could go home, sell my house, downsize a little bit, send the money out there, and 5 years from now, go to Africa and see these kids graduating from a high school. I mean, imagine if that were you. Imagine if you could go 5 years from now, go to a high school and see a graduating class of 50 to 100 kids. All because you built a school, you sacrificed something, because you didn't buy the car you wanted, or your house was a little bit smaller than you actually wanted. Can you imagine the joy you would have at that moment seeing these kids walk out and thinking, I did that. I did that. And it finally all made sense to me. Now I get it. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Look, I've done a lot of things in my life out of guilt. Like, ooh, I feel guilty, I should do that, or I give them, or whatever. But I finally got the truth of that passage, that it's not about guilt anymore. It's about what's going to make you really happy. What's really going to bring you blessing in life? Am I going to 5 years from now go, gosh, I am so happy because I got to ride in that vehicle for the last 5 years? Or will I be happier going to Uganda and seeing Francis Chan High, and going, wow, I did this with my life. I did this with a little bit of sacrifice. I did this. I mean, seriously, what is going to bring you fulfillment in life? Blessing. Spending it on yourself? Has that ever really brought you that much joy? I'm not saying we don't like stuff. We get stuff. We like it. We enjoy it. But I'm saying you compare that to the blessing of giving to someone else who's in more need of you and seeing the joy in their face and giving hope and life and education and a relationship with God, people that I will see for all of eternity. It's not about sacrifice. I'm not talking about, ooh, look at the martyr up there. I'm talking about, look at the hedonistic, selfish person up there that's saying, man, selfishly, I want to give to get that type of blessing, that type of reward. I met some of the most amazing people there in Africa. I met this, I didn't even get to meet these people, but I went to their orphanage. I went to this orphanage, and you know how this orphanage started? It was a couple from the U.S., and this guy was handicapped. I believe he was a Vietnam vet. He had no legs. He and his wife, living in Uganda, saw, an orphan kid digging through the trash and said, we can't let that happen. Let's have him come into our home. Pretty soon another kid comes. See another kid. They start taking kids in. Pretty soon they have to expand their house because they were taking in so many kids. Pretty soon they have a 3,000 square foot house, and they are housing 120 orphans. He and his wife have them stacked up in bunk beds all the way up the wall. They have them hanging from hammocks from the ceiling to sleep. 120 for this couple to take care of. But they couldn't send them away. Every time an orphan came to the house, it's like, well, what are we going to do? Send them away? So they kept building and building and building until they have a 3,000 square. That's not that huge for 120 orphans. Just stacking them up against the walls and everything and feeding them and caring for them and bathing them, clothing them, everything. And I thought, man, how is this couple going to feel at the end of their lives? Okay, imagine if you were one of them or you were that couple there. And let's just imagine you're towards the end of your life. You're sick, whatever. You're about to enter into heaven. How are you going to feel at that moment, knowing that's what you dedicated your life to? Do you understand why it's more blessed to give than to receive? Do you understand? Or you listen to that and go, well, I don't think they'd be that fulfilled. I think they would have been happier if they had stayed here and spent it all in themselves. Then they would have really felt like they did something with their lives. Met a little old widow lady. Same type of thing. This old widow who just took a kid into her home, took another kid, kept taking kids into her home, just in love with these children. Pretty soon she's got all these kids, and she starts educating them. Pretty soon it turned into a school. I got to speak at the school. A group of a couple hundred orphan kids at the school. Almost all of them, their parents died of AIDS. And I'm sitting there. I had the honor of sharing the gospel with these kids. And afterwards, talking to the lady who started the school, you should have seen just the smile on her face when she said, these are all of my children. And just smiling. And I just thought, that has got to be one of the most blessed women on this earth. She has got to understand a joy that we don't get. I mean, how would you feel at the end of your life if that were you? This is what I devoted my life to. Rather than, looking at all your possessions that you're going to have to leave behind, that you saved up and stored up for yourself. It's like, gosh, the joy in that. It all hit me. It's more blessed to give than to receive. Jesus isn't trying to destroy our lives and say, hey, you guys are going to be miserable, but just do it. He's saying, you want to find true joy, blessed are the poor. He said earlier in Luke, remember that? More blessed are you when you give than when you receive. Whatever you do for the least of these, you've done for me. I tell you, verses just popped in my mind constantly as I'm looking at these kids. One of the verses when we were looking at Luke, remember when Jesus said, who are my mother and my brothers? Remember that verse we studied earlier? Who are my mother and brothers? He says, it is those who hear the word of God and obey it. I tell you, that verse came to my mind because I'm looking at these kids and I'm saying, well, I'm glad my kids aren't like that. Then I think, wait a second, who are my kids? Who's my mother? Who's my brother? Jesus says there's a spiritual family out there that runs thicker than blood. He says they're the ones that obey the word of God. And I realized, wait a second, that's my child there. That's my kid there. And I'm just going to let her dig around the trash. I thought of do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The golden rule, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others. And I thought, okay, do unto others. Let's think about this phrase. What if that were me? Let's say that was me, Lisa, Rachel, and Mercy there in Africa. And let's say me and Lisa die and leave Rachel and Mercy as orphans and they're digging around the trash. What would I want someone else to do for my children? Just leave them there and go back and build an empire for themselves back in Southern California? It's like, I can't do that. Do unto others? That's my kid then. That's right. What do I want someone to do for my kids there? And all these things were hitting me, but the main verse was, it's more blessed to give than to receive. The thought that I could change someone's life, do something with what I have. It was huge. It was incredible. Everything was making sense. And I just thought, how would I feel at the end of my life if I knew I gave everything I could? And how would I feel for all of eternity if I did that? Then I get home, you know. I get home and I read about. I wasn't. It was the end of last year, you know, in December, just a month ago. And I didn't really have a plan for where I was going to read, so I just opened up the Bible and I turned to 2 Corinthians. I just flipping through. I thought, I haven't read 2 Corinthians in a while. And so one morning I just read through 2 Corinthians. And I got to chapters 8 and 9, and it hit me like never before. You'll have to read it sometime on your own, but I do want to read some verses from there. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, 2 Corinthians 8, there's this passage here, and let me give you some background before I read it. In 2 Corinthians 8, Paul is talking to the Corinthian church, and he's explaining to them. He goes, look, we've got brothers and sisters. We've got these saints in Jerusalem, and these saints, they're having a hard time even getting by. They don't, because of the persecution had gotten so bad. You know, they got no food, they got no money. And he's asking the Corinthian church, would you guys consider giving them some money? Would you give a gift to them because they're in need? And this is what he says in 2 Corinthians 8, verse 12. He says, for if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what he does not have. Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there might be equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn, their plenty will supply what you need. Then there will be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. See what Paul's saying there? First thing he says is, look, if the willingness is there, that's what we're asking for. We're not asking you to give money that you don't have, just you be willing to give what you can. And then he says this, he says, and I am not asking that you guys live in poverty and sacrifice while these saints over here become rich. He says, I'm just asking for equality. Thought about that phrase, equality. And he says, there may come a day when they're rich and they'll supply what you have in need. And then there'll be equality. He says, just like it says in the Bible. And he quotes, he who gathered much did not have too much. And he who gathered little did not have too little. That is actually a quote from Exodus 16 when God provides that bread from heaven, the manna. And it says, when you gather that, make sure the people that gather too much don't have too much. And they give it to the ones that have too little because it all came from God anyways. And it's that same picture here. He says, you know what? When you have plenty, the idea is that you give to those who have less. And that idea of equality, it's interesting because on the plane ride back, I was talking to one of the pastors that went on the trip with me to Uganda, and I'm telling him, dude, I want to just give all this and this and this, And he starts saying, he goes, well, but have you saved up enough so that your kids will go through college? You have enough for their college education? And do you have enough for your retirement? Do you have that all saved up first? And I said, well, how can you think about that? So you're telling me to worry about my kids 15 years from now, whether they're going to go to a private university, or whether I'll have enough for that. Meanwhile, equality is this kid starving to death who won't even see elementary school? How's there equality in that? I go, first of all, my kids, I'm sure they'll get through college. I mean, they're half Asian, they'll get a scholarship. They'll, half scholarship, and they'll whatever. God's going to take care of that. None of us had money, and we all made it through college. Somehow we'll get through. God will take care of that. But how can I be thinking that far in advance for this child when that child over there, who is also mine, who I'm supposed to do unto others as I'd want them to do unto me? How can I think about that? And how can I think about 40 years from now? I may retire. I doubt I ever will. But if I did, let's say, I got to worry about that and save up enough before caring for these people? You're kidding me. Where's this whole thought of equality of man, I've got brothers and sisters over there that are starving. They're having such a difficult time. I had no clue. I always thought, oh, I'm not materialistic, And I get over there and I realize you just don't see it when you live down here in Southern California. You think you're so generous and so giving, and you get out of your little bubble and you realize, well, I'm a selfish, materialistic. I'm not thinking about equality. I'm thinking about acquiring more for myself. And it's not, I want you to understand this. This is not a guilt thing at all. This is about, I want to live a happy life. I want to feel blessed at the end of my life. And I'm realizing more and more, it isn't coming from getting more, it's from giving. This week, a gal came in my office. She goes, Francis, let me share with you one of the top 10 experiences of my life happened this week. It's like, really, what was that? And you remember about a month or two ago, we had that barbecue in the inner city in South Central, where we just put on a community barbecue for them and helped them with this church plant out there to care for the people in the inner city. This one gal that met one of the high school girls that lived out there in the inner city and got her phone number and says, I'd love to call you sometime and we'll get together. And the girl's thinking, yeah, sure. And this girl calls her from our church, calls her and says, hey, I want to take you out shopping. You and a couple of your friends. So she drives down to South Central and picks up these 3 teenage girls, and she takes them to a mall. They had never been in a mall before. The mom said she's been up since 6 a.m. So excited about this day. Takes them to the mall and says, you know what, you guys buy an outfit, any outfit you want. They come back to her with socks and underwear. And she says, no, we'll pay for that, we'll buy that, but I want you to buy an outfit. Buy something that you like, that it'll make you look good, whatever you think, you enjoy. Just whatever, it doesn't matter, money, just get it. They come back with outfits. She purchased them. She goes, I want to take you to lunch. Where would you guys like to go? Anywhere. And they go, Kentucky Fried Chicken? She goes, no. Okay, if you could dream big and you could eat anywhere, the nicest restaurant, sit down, be served, where would it be? And their eyes just lit up and they said, Sizzler? That's all they knew. And she says, let's go to Sizzler. Takes them to Sizzler, goes back to their house and says, let's put your clothes away in your rooms. We don't have rooms. We all live in this room. Oh, okay. Sorry. He said, hey, can we visit your house sometime? She says, yeah, absolutely. You're going to come over to my house. We're going to have a barbecue. They said, well, can we spend the night sometime? Absolutely, you can spend the night with me. She says, does your house have a yard where there's grass? By now, tears are coming down her face as she's telling me the story. She says, Francis, I have never been so blessed. I thought about how frivolously I've spent my money and this and that, and just the joy I could breathe. She goes, and that's 35 minutes away. She goes, you're in Africa, yeah, and you can go there once or twice a year, fly halfway around the world, but I only have to drive half an hour to give and the blessing from that. Do you know how good that made me feel? You know how much blessing I got from that? More than anything I'd ever receive. And it's those words of Jesus. It made sense. It is. It's more blessed. You don't experience that from someone buying you an outfit. Sure, you're happy. Or someone buys you a meal. Yeah, great. But you don't experience that type of blessing unless you give. You ever hear of people that get those jobs where you go, you're kidding me? You make money for doing that? I want to tell you about this job. And this is someone in our church, okay? This is what he gets paid to do. He gets paid, okay? He works for like this bazillionaire guy who gives him money to give to the poor. Okay? So he's the one, it's not his money. He gets to take the money from this guy, and he gets the reward of handing it to them and just blessing them. And it's totally up to him. He's the manager. He's the discretion. He gives it to whoever he wants. And so he researches and he finds out needs different places, and he takes this money and gives it to them. And that's his whole life. And in addition to that, the guy with all the money just says, you know what, and I'll take care of all your expenses, your food, your clothes, your housing, everything is taken care of. I just want you to manage my money and give to the poor. Nice job? I was talking about your job. Do you get it yet? Your money's not your own. Where do you think it all came from? You think you earned a penny of what you've got by your own efforts and your own power? That somehow you gave life to yourself and you're alive today because of something you did? And that you were just so brilliant, you were this, you were that? And that you have anything of your own? Don't you understand that we have God in heaven who owns everything on this earth, and he distributes, and he says, look, you can take my money that I give you and you use it as you please. You distribute it to the poor. That's our job. We're all in here going, ooh, I wish I had a job like that, not realizing that is our job. God promises he will take care of our food, our clothes, our shelter. But he says, you invest in the kingdom,